Political analyst Professor Kedibone Phago joins us now to talk about this. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your time. You have here a leader of the opposition accusing the Premier of withholding information about wrongdoing in the province. But then he also goes on to say that this has been happening since, or this goes back to 2016, when David Makhura was Premier of this province. Now, members of the executive, as in the Premier and MECs, have as much of a responsibility as do members of the legislature, whether they are in the opposition or also serving in those committees as members of the governing parties, to make sure that they hold people in power responsible. I actually found it curious that this problem goes back to 2016 and the DA has never raised it as sharply as it is they are raising it now.
Good afternoon, Vuyo, and thank you for having me. And you are very correct. I think this is a very interesting development. My initial reaction to this matter now that the DA is raising it, it's purely for political expediency. And I think it is going to work very well for the DA, because at the heart of this is that the DA wants to make sure that the ANC's support gets completely eroded. And bringing this matter up at this particular point in time and sustain it until local government elections to demonstrate that the ANC provincial government has actually been shielding people that were involved in corruption can actually completely take ANC to the lowest margins in the next local government election. So I think it's very strategic and even much more tactical in a way.
Should they be let off the hook then? Because even though they may not be the ones responsible for releasing the information they are saying is being withheld, they too have a responsibility of putting the those who are in the executive or broadly members of the governing party and officials of the administration on their toes.
You are very correct, and I think in your opening statements you alluded to this point. So what we know should happen is that the members of the provincial legislatures need to follow up on these issues. But we have seen in so many instances in provinces, in local government, and even in national government, that whenever the governing party has majority, they find ways of, obfuscating and diverting attention to other things. And so we see that a lot of things get through, like this kind of situations now, that there are reports that need to be taken out, but the executive is doing whatever it can to make sure that those do not come out. And for the reason that we have a lot of evidence from our public protector, from the Auditor General, even from the SIU, that many of the corruption activities do have politicians involved. So it is not going to be easy to always point a finger to a public official when they know it may also implicate some among them.
Of course, I mean, you as a political analyst and myself as a journalist know very well that in spite of all the political point scoring that we may see, or the grandstanding, as some people would prefer to call it, there is almost always a degree of truth in many of these allegations that should never be ignored.
And this is, I think this is the case at this particular point in time. And so the DA strategy, I think there was a report recently that demonstrated that there is a lot of support by South Africans supporting the government of national unity. And the disagreements that have come out from the Gauteng provincial government and the DA to sort of consolidate their powers in Gauteng and especially in metros seems to actually bringing this matter to the fore. And it's very clear to me that the DA is going to use this to say that the ANC in Gauteng is not necessarily a very good partner. And in fact, as they have done, they are targeting the chairperson and the premier in Gauteng. And so you can actually see that to some degree, it is to delegitimize the premier, and of course with very solid and sound allegations.
Of course, I mean, it's no reason, whatever may be behind what the DA is doing or trying to do, does not give Panyaza Lesufi and members of his administration powers, or it's not a good enough reason for them to ignore these requests, just as much as a Solim Simanga and the rest of his party deployees in the provincial legislature should also make sure that they too leave no stone unturned in making sure that he does actually comply, and where they fall short, they should, as he promised to do now, approach other institutions like the Public Protector's Office.
That's correct. And I think also just making this matter as public as it is now puts a lot of pressure on the premier to make sure that those reports come out and that the public is able to make an informed decision on where the premier stands. And this actually, it's quite significant to the premier, because the longer he takes to bring these reports out, the more his public image is going to suffer.
And remarks like, as one remark came from the Premier's spokesperson, that the Premier was being targeted by, as quote-unquote, anti-progressive groups, is really neither here nor there, because indeed, as Solim Simanga says, if the Premier has nothing to hide, and if he too is keen on clamping down on corruption, he would be the first person to actually make sure that he does what he's being asked by the opposition in this instance to do.
We have heard those sentiments, just before the formation of the government of national unity, that there are parties that are progressive and that others are not progressive. But we have not seen those who call themselves progressive, progressing in any substantive matter. And it is for the ANC, especially the left in the ANC, to get their act together and demonstrate that they are able to serve South Africa, deliver services, run a clean and a transparent government. Otherwise, giving out this kind of political rhetorics, it's not going to serve their future in government very positively.
Especially where it's abundantly clear that the people who are suffering, are the less fortunate, the poor, the sick, and the infirm. Because if you look at the Department of Social Development report that the DA is talking about, one of the many reports that it is citing, we know what happened there, and we know who is suffering there. Community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations that are trying to assist the less fortunate sections of our population have been complaining about this and the fact that nothing is being done about it. So this is not a misplaced, call or argument by the DA at all.
I think it's worse than what we see, Vuyo. We have problems in our hospitals. We have problems with the provision of water and sanitations. We've got problems with our access to, education, basic education. So there are just problems across the board. And we have not really seen substantive plans to communities by our politicians and by our leaders to say, in terms of our roads, this is the plan for the next 3 years. In terms of our housing developments, this is... So we are just, is at the mercy of a good Samaritan who may come at a particular point in time and help out. And I think this is where we need, the media, the academia, we need the NGOs to stand up and continue to put this kind of pressure on the political leadership so they understand that their role is primarily service delivery and nothing more.